This might look like just another lesson in manipulation. A cold, calculated view of how to bend people to your will. But it's not what you think. Because the real danger isn't in suppressing emotion or removing it from power, it's in using it with surgical precision. Machiavelli didn't advocate for emotionless rule. He didn't preach stoicism as control. He showed something more dangerous. He revealed that the most powerful form of manipulation isn't silence, it's vulnerability. Not the kind that makes you weak. The kind that makes others drop their guard. The kind that makes them feel seen, heard, safe, just long enough to open the door. Then you step through. This isn't about pretending not to feel. It's about deciding exactly which feelings to show and when. Because when you master the display of emotion, not for honesty, but for effect, you no longer react to people. You orchestrate them. And that is the beginning of emotional warfare. 1. The strategy begins with visibility, not silence. Most people misunderstand emotional control. They think it means bottling everything up, wearing a mask of neutrality, never reacting, never feeling. But that only works if you want to survive, not if you want to rule. Machiavelli understood that humans don't bond over strength alone. They bond over connection, over recognition. And that recognition comes from emotional cues, expressions, gestures, tone, presence. To remain completely stoic is to be invisible. But visibility is influence. So Machiavelli mastered the paradox, how to be emotionally visible without ever being emotionally vulnerable. He knew how to cry without pain, how to confess without sincerity, how to show loyalty without meaning it. Because once people believe they've seen the real you, they relax. They think the performance is over. But for Machiavelli, that's when the real performance began. 2. Mirror their emotions, bypass their defenses. The first step in emotional warfare isn't confrontation. It's reflection. Mirror someone's emotions, and you walk straight through their defenses. If they're angry, you offer concern. If they're proud, you offer admiration. If they're afraid, you offer stability. Not because you feel it too, but because they need to believe you do. People are disarmed not by power, but by emotional familiarity. When someone feels seen, they stop scanning for threats. They stop defending. And they start opening. That's the moment Machiavelli exploited, when someone begins speaking more freely, revealing more than they intended, trusting what shouldn't be trusted. He didn't just listen to what they said. He watched how they felt while saying it. Then he mirrored it, not to comfort them, but to control the pace of their emotional rhythm. Once you control the rhythm, you control the outcome. 3. Reveal emotion, but only with precision. To most, vulnerability is an accident. A moment of weakness, breakdown, exposure. But to Machiavelli, vulnerability was a tactic. When he needed to sway a group, he wouldn't raise his voice. He would lower it. He'd pause more. Share a story. Not one that begged for pity, but one that softened the air. He didn't believe in overexposing himself. He believed in revealing just enough. A carefully measured display of humanity that pulled people closer. Emotional warfare is not about being cold. It's about being warm strategically. About displaying sincerity just long enough to make the lie believable. The trick is this: when others become emotionally responsive to you, they become less logically resistant. Emotion bypasses the brain's defenses. You don't argue someone into agreement. You make them feel their way into it. And once they feel aligned with you, they don't even realize they've conceded. For emotional chaos is a weapon. Confuse, then lead. There is nothing more destabilizing than inconsistency. And Machiavelli knew how to wield it. One day he'd be warm. The next, sharp, distant, unreadable. This wasn't indecision. It was design. When people can't predict your emotional response, they start calculating every word, every gesture. They lean in. They hesitate. They try to adapt. And in that hesitation, you gain leverage. Emotional consistency makes you easy to read and easier to manipulate. But unpredictability scrambles their strategy. They start reacting to you instead of focusing on their own agenda. That's when control flips. Not when you overpower them, but when they begin shaping themselves around your mood. This is the hidden core of Machiavelli's emotional warfare. You become the storm and others navigate you. 5. Make them chase the feeling, not the facts. Facts can be debated. Evidence can be challenged. But feelings are obeyed. Machiavelli didn't try to win arguments. He made others emotionally dependent. He would offer warmth once, recognition, praise, understanding. Then he'd withdraw. Subtly, slowly, just enough to create a void. And people hate voids. They scramble to fill them. They seek the connection again. They offer more. They reveal more. They self-correct. Not because they were told to, but because they felt the shift and want the feeling back. That's the leverage no one sees. Not threats. Not demands. But absence. Emotional leverage isn't about pressure. It's about positioning. Give someone the feeling of being deeply understood once, and they'll work harder to maintain that bond than they ever would for logic. 6. Confuse ownership with influence. There's no stronger trap than making someone believe they influenced you. Machiavelli often allowed others to think they swayed his opinion, that their insight shifted his direction. He'd nod slowly, repeat a phrase they used, appear grateful for their guidance. But his decision was already made. The performance wasn't about agreeing. It was about giving them a sense of ownership over him. Because once someone believes they shaped you, they become emotionally invested in your success. They defend you. They justify you. They tie their identity to yours. This is where pride binds tighter than loyalty. They feel responsible for you. And you? You've turned emotional pride into a leash. A leash they will protect, without realizing who holds it. 7. Silence as psychological dominance. Not all control is visible. Sometimes, it's the silence that speaks loudest. Machiavelli would share something personal, raw, even emotional, and then vanish into silence. Not coldness. Not abandonment. Just a pause. An absence. And in that pause, people spiral. They analyze. Reanalyze. They question what they missed. What they said wrong. What they need to say now. That's how silence becomes a mirror. Not of your feelings, but of theirs. They fill the vacuum with guilt, hope, insecurity. And you watch. You learn. You collect data without revealing anything new. Strategic silence is not retreat. It's reconnaissance. 8. Contradiction is your mask. Use it. The most powerful people are rarely consistent. One moment warm, the next calculating. One moment gentle, the next unshakable. This isn't weakness. It's confusion as control. Because once people think they've figured you out, you become part of their map. And maps can be followed, manipulated, predicted. But if they can't map you, they can't plan against you. Machiavelli lived in contradiction. He could write letters full of warmth, then advise the coldest betrayals. He could appear open, then act ruthless. And because of that, no one ever truly relaxed around him. Emotional unpredictability isn't just strategy, it's survival. Because when no one knows what version of you they'll get, they tread more carefully. And that means you're no longer a person. You're an environment. 9. Target the influencer, control the group. Machiavelli never tried to move crowds all at once. That's inefficient. Too loud. Too messy. He focused on the emotional pivot point, the one person everyone else watched. The subtle leader. The influencer. And once he found them, he engaged them emotionally. A phrase. A glance. A contradiction. Just enough to destabilize them. Because when the most emotionally grounded person shifts, the whole group adjusts. Emotion spreads like smoke. One flicker turns into a fire. And once everyone is adjusting to the new atmosphere, you've changed the temperature of the room without raising your voice. 10. Build systems that trigger emotion automatically. The highest form of emotional warfare isn't person-to-person. It's structural. Machiavelli understood that true control comes when you don't need to be present to influence behavior. He designed environments where emotion did the work. Systems where attention was scarce. Praise was unpredictable. Fear was ambient. And because of that, people regulated themselves. Not out of loyalty, but out of emotional instability. They chased clarity. They chased validation. And they adjusted their behavior constantly to avoid discomfort. That's not culture. That's puppeteering at scale. When you design an emotional climate, people begin to obey feelings they think are their own. But the truth is, you engineered the weather. And now they live in your storm. 11. Use emotional scarcity to drive obsession. People don't obsess over what's abundant. They obsess over what's rare. Over what's almost within reach. Machiavelli understood that constant emotional presence makes people take you for granted. But scarcity keeps them chasing. He would offer connection sparingly, recognition sparingly, and every small moment of warmth was magnified in the minds of others. They remembered it. They cherished it. They worked to earn it again. Emotional scarcity transforms attention into currency, approval into power, and silence into dominance. Not because you're better, but because you're absent just enough to make them feel incomplete without you. 12. Let them reveal themselves while they watch you. When someone seeks your emotional validation, they become readable. Watch how they pause after speaking, how they scan your face, how they overexplore their thoughts, how they adjust their tone. These are all tells. Because the moment you control the emotional temperature of the interaction, they become interpreters. Of your silences, of your nods, of your restraint. And now you're not the one seeking clarity, they are. They give more than they intend, reveal more than they plan. And slowly, they stop thinking about strategy and start thinking about you. That's when influence becomes ownership. 13. Time emotional displays like weapons. Emotion isn't power. Timing is. The most dangerous weapon in emotional warfare is not what you feel. It's when you let them see it. Machiavelli never denied his feelings. He just released them like smoke through a vent. Controlled, intentional, impossible to ignore. He knew that a single tear at the right moment could sway more than 100 facts. That a slight hesitation, a breath, a pause, could shift the entire tone of a conversation. The power isn't in how strong your emotions are. It's in how deliberately you deploy them. Emotional warfare isn't a flood. It's a drip, cold, strategic, disarming. 14. Replace trust with emotional contracts. People don't stay loyal because of reason. They stay loyal because of emotion. But Machiavelli didn't rely on blind trust. He replaced it with something more powerful, emotional contracts. He'd create a moment, a memory, a connection that someone would want to return to, and then he'd withhold it. And in that absence, they would reach. Not for him, but for the feeling he gave. And once someone chases a feeling, they stop measuring value objectively. They begin to justify, to rationalize, to self-sacrifice, to hold on to a moment they once felt and now crave again. That's how emotional need becomes obedience. 15. Create the illusion of depth. People fear what they can't define. Machiavelli knew that the best way to command long-term respect wasn't to be emotional. It was to seem emotionally deep. People project meaning onto depth. They assume wisdom. They assume complexity. But the trick is, you don't need to actually be complex. You only need to appear unpredictable, layered, unreadable. Say little. Contradict occasionally. Withdraw often. And soon, they'll build stories around you. Stories they protect. Stories they follow. Because once someone believes you are deeper than them, they stop playing chess. They start watching the board. And now, they're not competing with you. They're orbiting you. This may look like influence, like charisma, charm, maybe even leadership. But it's not what you think. Because the most powerful kind of control doesn't come from being followed. It comes from being needed. And Machiavelli understood that better than anyone. He didn't seek loyalty through love, fear, or obedience. He engineered it through dependency. Quiet, invisible, irreversible dependency. Not on him, but on the version of themselves people could only access through him. You don't need to command loyalty if you can make yourself the emotional centerpiece of someone's reality. And when that happens, they don't just follow, they tether their identity to you. That's the trap. That's the power. And that's what Machiavelli mastered. Most people think loyalty is a result of character. That if you're good to others, if you protect them, support them, earn their trust, they'll stay. But that kind of loyalty is fragile. It's circumstantial. It disappears when fear arrives or when opportunity knocks. Machiavelli didn't gamble on morality. He built mechanisms. He knew that lasting loyalty must be engineered, not earned. Not based on principle, but need. People don't stay because they love you. They stay because you hold a piece of their stability. You offer something they can't replicate. Something they fear losing more than they fear you. That's the difference between being liked and being necessary. Machiavelli didn't ask people to trust him. He made himself emotionally irreplaceable. The first step to the loyalty trap is simple. Reward unpredictably. When you praise, recognize, or affirm someone regularly, they adapt. They expect it. They stop chasing. But when you reward sporadically, when your approval arrives unexpectedly, on your terms, at your timing, you condition pursuit. They begin to chase a feeling. And when that feeling is no longer predictable, they begin to self-regulate. They watch your mood. They analyze your tone. They alter their behavior just to recreate that one moment of connection. You haven't just influenced their action, you've installed a ritual. A cycle. And all you have to do is maintain emotional scarcity. People don't form habits around abundance. They form them around uncertainty. And once that habit forms, obedience becomes automatic. A person connected to many sources of validation can walk away from any one of them. But a person emotionally isolated, even subtly, is much easier to bind. Machiavelli didn't cut people off from others. That would have raised suspicion. Instead, he redirected attention. He created subtle hierarchies. He elevated one, ignored another. He praised in public, criticized in private. Over time, people recalibrated. They began seeking only his approval. And as that circle of emotional influence shrank, his control expanded. People believe they're loyal because they choose to be. But in truth, they're loyal because they've forgotten how to feel safe without you. That's the trap. Limit their sources of psychological safety, and you become the only emotional anchor they trust. Loyalty isn't about facts. It's about stories. And Machiavelli never told people what to think. He gave them emotional frames and let them fill in the rest. He'd say something vague but loaded. Your insight is unlike anyone else's I've met. And let silence do the rest. They would write the story. They would believe he saw them, understood them, valued them above others. And because the idea felt self-created, they defended it fiercely. People don't challenge what they think they invented. They guard it. They protect it. And that's the trap. Install a belief subtly, emotionally, without forcing it, and they'll become loyal not to you, but to the version of the story that flatters them most. That's a bond no fact can break. One of Machiavelli's most dangerous tactics was allowing others to feel powerful, but only inside the structure he controlled. He would offer autonomy, freedom, choice, but all of it framed within his design. And people loved it. They felt respected, valued, trusted. But in reality, they were moving inside walls they didn't build. That's the illusion of independence. You let them win battles you don't care about so they'll never see the war you're actually fighting. You give them victories to keep them invested in your system. Because someone who believes they have power will never try to escape. They'll become its guardian, its defender, and they won't even realize they've been caged. Guilt is one of the strongest adhesives in the loyalty arsenal. But you don't need to accuse. You only need to suggest. Machiavelli would withhold slightly. Slow down response. Withdraw warmth after a minor mistake. Not enough to create confrontation, just enough to create self-doubt. And in that doubt, people began to overcorrect. Apologize. Work harder. Try to regain favor. And here's the brilliance. When they began feeling guilty, he never punished them. He forgave them warmly, casually, quietly. And that created emotional relief so profound, they tied their worth to him. Because now they didn't just need his approval, they needed his forgiveness. That's not loyalty. That's submission dressed as redemption. People don't fear presence. They fear the unknown. Machiavelli didn't assert control by being constantly involved. He made his absence meaningful. A quiet moment, a delayed answer, a withheld glance. These weren't gaps, they were tools. Emotional withdrawal creates tension, pressure, longing. And when that vacuum appears, people fill it with their own projections. They imagine what went wrong. They create stories. They rehearse explanations. And all of that effort comes from one thing, the belief that they need to restore balance. But that balance isn't real. It's engineered. And the longer they chase your presence, the tighter the trap becomes. Machiavelli didn't lead through conflict. He led through inclusion. But inclusion with edges. He would speak of unity, of shared mission, of brotherhood, but always imply an inner circle. A more loyal, more worthy group. And in doing so, he made people compete for closeness. They wanted to be in the trusted tier. They wanted to be the one he spoke to first. And they didn't even realize they were isolating themselves from each other in the process. That's the trick. Speak the language of collective loyalty, but deliver it through hierarchy. When people are more loyal to their position within your structure than to each other, they will protect the system, even if it costs them everything. This is the deepest layer of the loyalty trap. Machiavelli positioned himself not just as an authority, but as a mirror of progress. He would tell people, "You've come so far," or "I've seen the change in you." And suddenly he wasn't just someone they obeyed, he was the lens through which they saw their own improvement. Now their identity was attached to his perception, and any distance from him felt like regression. This is how you bind people without commands. You don't threaten them, you become their measurement of self-worth. And when someone believes they've grown because of you, they will never risk going backward. Which means they'll never risk losing you.